Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show where humanity meets technology. I'm Maurice Hamilton again, and this is my co-host Kelly, and we're introducing our spectacular guest here, Gerald Leonard. And Gerald, we're talking about the principles of music. So I want to frame this question in a couple different ways here. And I saw you do a TED Talk, or it was actually in one of the books that you've written. Like I said, everyone, he's an author, and you spoke about the principles of music and how we can see performers out there, and you'll see them on stage 5% of the time, but they're spending 95% of their time. Gerald, how would you actually correlate that over to business world and how practice and how music can actually correlate with that?
Sure. So, as you can see from behind me, I am a musician from my core. I've been playing since I was 10. I won't tell you my age, but I've been playing for over 50 years. And so, it's a big part of who I am as a person. But one of the things I learned right away when I first started playing, I actually started playing guitar. And a friend of mine was an amazing guitar player. And so I knew I had to play bass because keep up with him. And so in switching and doing that, I started having to learn the whole concept of the song and everything else. And there were three things that stood out to me that I learned as a kid that I later took into my life as I switched careers and became a CEO and an author and all these other things. And that was one, you have to practice, right? You got to work on your craft. You got to play your scales, you got to play the music, you have to study the instrument and really focus on mastery of the instrument. You need a mentor, you need a coach, you need someone who's a tour guide, not a travel agent. A tour guide is someone who has experience and they've been to the mountaintop many times and they can take you there and they can tell you all the things you need to look out for. A tour guide is just going to give you a sheet of paper and say, hope you have a good time. Right? Mm-hmm. And then you need a band. You need to have a group, an organization where you can talk shop. So when I got into project portfolio management, I practiced project management. I would practice on the tools. I would practice on the concepts. I listened to webinars. I listened to all different types of things and read books to practice the concepts. Then when I reached out to those who wrote books on this topic and who did the webinars because I needed them as my coaches. And so I built relationships. And then I joined organizations like PMI or the Microsoft Project User Group. And that became my band where I could talk shop. I've done the same thing as a CEO, right? I found coaches who are excellent CEOs or thought leaders and work with them. I've studied. I've taken courses. I've done executive Ivy League programs to keep practicing the craft. And then I join organizations where I can be around other high-performing CEOs that I can learn from. And so those three principles are things that really changed my life, which is you have to have deliberate practice, not just practicing and just playing, but literally pushing yourself to grow, having a mentor and a coach, and having a band. And by the way, I just released this year an EP of 4 Beatles songs that I recorded with my music producer, and I'm working on my next album. And I still take lessons. I meet with a really advanced younger person who's a really amazing bassist, and I take lessons even to the day in working on my craft because to me it's all about the journey and about mastery.
That's you were mentioning, we were talking about music once before, and you knew some friends of yours, and they actually have a son who actually does music, and how they practice all the time.
Consistently. It is a constant achievement that you never hit that peak where you're so good you don't have to do it. I agree with you no matter what it is. I think also with the challenges of our society today, I think music is therapy in some ways. What are your thoughts on that, Gerald?
Music being therapy. You mentioned earlier that you saw my TEDx. What you didn't know was that 6 weeks before that TEDx, I had a major bout with vertigo, and I lost the ability to walk.
Oh, wow.
And I literally had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance. I was in the hospital for a day and a half. I spent a week in bed. I could not walk. I couldn't watch television. And I'm sitting here rehearsing my talk. And if you watch the TEDx talk, I talk about the neuroscience of music. And so I knew that once I got up, I needed to grab one of my basses and just start playing. And every day I started playing and slowly began to start walking, holding on to the walker, holding on to the walls. And within 3 weeks, I walked into my doctor's office unassisted. And 3 weeks after that, I walked on stage and delivered that TEDx talk that you saw. Now, after that TEDx, that vertigo situation left me with a vestibular imbalance constraint. I don't call it a disability, I call it a constraint, because words create your world. So if you use words like disabled, your body obeys that and starts becoming disabled. So I don't use those words. But what happened to me was I started learning about neuroscience, kinesiology, epigenetics, and leveraging music, and it rewired my brain and allowed me to develop these concepts that I've created called Productivity Smarts based on my podcast that I teach, which is basically how do you actually get a lot done without burning out, and really balancing and focusing on that 20% that produces the 80%. And so, it's something that I've had to live with, and music has been not only a blessing in my life, but it has actually restored and saved my life, if you will.
Well, thank God that you're okay, you recovered from that, because you're right, some people with the wrong mindset would have taken that the wrong way, and they still may be in a bad situation, So you've taken that and turned it around. And you mentioned about the coaching and teaching, and we talked a little bit about constraints. So when people actually have the right mental attitude, it does make a difference where you can overcome those constraints, and it'll propel you to the next level. So you know what, I'm not gonna, no matter what happens, I'm not gonna let this bother me in personal life, business life, relationships. It makes a big difference. Just saying, it's not gonna stop me. I don't have any constraints.
Right. Well, here's the thing, is that I actually studied with D. Jacob, who worked with Elliot Goldratt, who wrote the book The Goal. Elliot was a physicist, and he developed the concept of theory of constraints. So when you study the theory of constraints from a very technical perspective, what you realize is that a constraint is not a bad thing. That's why I use the word constraint, because in my mind, a constraint is a good thing. Think about when you water your garden outside. What do? You go to Home Depot, you get a nozzle, you put it on the end of your hose, and you turn the water on. It only sprays out a little bit of water, but because of the nozzle or the constraint, you have more spray, but you're using fewer resources. So a constraint is not something that's bad. Many times we need constraints in our lives because it will force us to really make best use of our resources, but get the most out of those resources. And so that's how I use that term, is that the vestibular constraint forced me to really rethink what productivity was and how to become more productive. And since then, I've had an investment on my business. I've written the 3 books. There's so many things that I've had a chance to do, travel international, and so on. And yet it's learning how to overcome, and it's how.
Yeah, I have one more question for you, one more big question.
Sure.
I am not going to go back and talk about politics, because I listened on the radio, I see these guys want to fighting, they want to kill each other on TV. So we're not going to even talk about the politics. So I'll reframe it to a really, really great part of that. And let's talk about something wonderful that just happened, the Super Bowl, So my question is more directed to, can these principles be applied to a sports organization as well, or to people who really want to be competitive, where they can actually go back and say, you know what, I'm going to apply the same guidelines and principles to being number one.
Exactly. Well, I think, one of the telltale signs or the amazing stories that came out of the Super Bowl was, Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for the Eagles. And, the Ravens are my team. So I'm, a couple of my buddies, the Eagles are their team, the Ravens my team. But I really respect what Jalen did in his approach, is that even with criticisms and impact and whatever people were saying to him, he knew where he was going. He stayed focused. And in fact, when he lost the Super Bowl the last time to the Chiefs, what did he do? He took a picture of him walking away, where he had the red confetti coming down, and he said, this will never happen again. He put it on his phone and he looked at it every day. One of the things that we don't do in our society is sometimes realize that we need positive encouragement, and we need the carrot and we need the stick, right? We need to know what the reward is, but we also need to know, hey, if I don't work hard enough, then I'm going to experience this thing again. And what he reminded himself was, hey, here's where I'm trying to go. But also he kept that picture in front of his face every day, every time he looked at his phone, and it says, it's where I don't want to be. So we can also use the carrot and stick to motivate us in our own lives to move forward. But also think about it this way. He did it every day. It was all the time that he saw it. And many times that's what we have to do, is become a little radical in our focus and keep things in front of us, whether it's our goal of where we're going or what we don't want, and understand what that means so that we stay motivated. And that's what he did. And this is a great example of being productivity smart.
That's awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. Gerald Leonard just told us the principles of how to solve a problem, business, personal. He gave us some guidelines. He told us how to bring a team together. He told us how to actually get that culture built on the same, singing off the same sheet of music, because you're a musician, so I want to make sure I say it right. Same sheet of music, So this is good. This is a great conversation. Kelly, I want to thank you for actually joining us, and Gerald, we appreciate your time and everything for it. So thank you everyone for watching where humanity meets technology, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.